You probably don't know this game. But CarnyPop, I hear you say, that says Dungeons and Dragons. I know Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, you do. You most likely do. But you probably don't know 4th edition because we've all tried to forget about it. You can tell something is wrong with 4th edition the minute you look at this book. You couldn't at the time because you hadn't looked in it. You didn't know the rest of it was rotten. But I know that when you look at this cover and you look at how much like a strategy guide it looks, you realize that something is off. Because just an edition ago, books looked like this. They looked like magic fucking tomes that contained the knowledge you needed to play the game. This is a monster manual, a manual of monsters. It's got a fucking eye on it. It's sick. So, when you looked at the game, you already knew something was off. And the biggest problem with 4th edition is that instead of remaining true to their identity as like the great granddaddy of RPGs and like trying to think of the ways to hone it, they took the one problem with 3.5, which is that it's too complicated, because in many ways it is, and gets in the way of things, and they decided to simplify. And they decided to look at MMOs. And as a result, every fucking class in this goddamn game plays the same. They all level up at the same rate. They all get abilities at the fucking same rate. They're fucking... Hold on. They're color-coded. Red means encounter. Gray means daily. Green means at wills. You never do a basic attack in this game because at wills replace them. Also, I was showing you the wizards section of the book, and it looked like that. And let's take a look here. Ah, look at that. That's a fighter page. They look the same. The abilities function the same. You pick your ability. It does a thing. That's it. You have some that you can use once per fight and some you can use once per day. Occasionally you can use an action point, which allowed you to take an extra action. Big surprise. Everybody got one a day. So, this game, for most people who've played other editions of Dungeons & Dragons, is unrecognizable. And it was full of bullshit. So, I've got a lot of stories in this game, because playing D&D is like breathing for me. Running D&D is like breathing for me. I can do it at any time. If someone busts into my room, like right now, and said, "Hey, CarnyPop, I need you to run a D&D session right now," and then people came in, I would have the dice, the books, the character sheets, and the know-how to be ready. Like, I could immediately go like, all right, do you have your characters made? And we would start playing. Where I honed that skill was in the Fires of 4th edition. That is the game I have played the most out of all of them. I was running 3 games a weekend. I was getting home from high school, writing the session, starting to play at 9 p.m., playing until 2 in the morning, going home, sleeping, waking up, running a session starting at noon, going home, sleeping usually, like we would play until forever at night. Wake up, do the same thing on Sunday. I don't know when I got homework done, to be honest. My grades in high school were fairly good, but I legitimately don't know when the work got done. So, I'm coming at telling everyone about this, like giving this vlog, as someone who has really been through it. I have played almost all 30 levels of this game before. I never play the late teens because, oh yeah, this is a 30-level game instead of a 20-level game like most of it because everything's got to be big, man. You add half your level to everything you roll in 4th edition. You like big numbers in your Memorpagers? Well, here they are. I said Memorpager because, like, you know, this is same era that I was actually watching Zero Punctuation, right? So, I'm going to tell you one example story. This one isn't about the D&D aspect of it. It isn't about the narrative. I've got tons of those, and I'll probably vlog about those at some point, maybe later this week. Who knows? The Daily Drop's been going on for a little while, and we're near the end of it, and we need some goddamn videos, so who the fuck knows? But for right now, I'm just going to tell you about one character's build. Shinkai, the Impaler, was an Avenger, which is basically an angry paladin. What I mean by that is that they are a DPS class because everything had roles here. Defender, striker, controller, leader. And they're your MMO shit. They're your tank, your DPS, your like AoE, and then your buffs and heals. So, Shinkai was an Avenger. Avengers were strikers, but they got the same HP as paladins for some reason. So there was that. No matter what you fought with, you always used your best stat to hit. So this was someone who had a 10 strength, so no plus to strength, but fought with a big Mordenkrad, which is a spiked hammer, spiked dwarven hammer, which dealt 2d6, which were brutal ones. I fucking forgot about brutal ones. So built into the edition were weapons that had dice that made it so if you rolled below a certain number, you re-rolled until you no longer had that number. So this meant that on 2d6, the lowest this character could roll was a 4. And the maximum they could roll was a 12. So your range was a lot lower. And then there was a feat you could take for Avengers because you got a feat every other level in this edition. Every other level and at 1st, 11th, and 21st. So you got every even level as well as those. So there were a lot of feats, and a lot of feats were fucking garbage, and some feats were fucking amazing. And there was no rhyme or reason as to why they were that good. At least in 5th edition, you get a feat every 4 levels, unless you're a fighter. But when you get one, you get a new way to play the game, right? You usually get a significant boost to your kit. This one, you just fucking would get very tiny feats that overall would stack up into this crazy character. But it didn't have the homebrew, build your own thing feel that 3.5 had. Because there was no multiclassing. You needed to sync 4 feats to multiclass. And all you got to do by the end was get a neutered version of their special feature. Because everyone had a very pointed special feature. That's the obvious one to give. And you could start picking powers from the other class. You didn't even get, all the abilities, all the things I showed you, they're all just called powers. They would sometimes be called exploits or spells, but they all powers. They all worked the same way. So you could just start picking from the other class whenever you leveled up, whenever you leveled up, but you didn't get to get both. There was no way to get both. There was no I'm 3 levels of this and 5 levels of this. There's none of that. But back to Shinkai. Shinkai is a wisdom-based character who fights with a giant hammer. That was one feat. You took that at level 1. It was easy. Fought with a giant hammer. Called himself the Impaler even though he fought with a giant hammer. That was always great. And has a great wisdom. Cool. All of the abilities used it. Also, all of the powers that used a weapon had a little notation that was a bracket in W. So it would say 1 weapon damage, or 2 weapon damage, or 4 weapon damage for your really big attacks. The thing about this is that meant that it was always advantageous to just have the biggest fucking weapon possible. There was some times where they would make dual wielding work, where powers only worked if you had 2 weapons, but They usually fucking sucked. The best idea was to just have something that let you roll as much dice as possible. So when you had a character... Oh, the other thing about Avengers is that they got a boost to their armor based on their wisdom, like an unarmed defense thing, but they could still wear light armor, and Dex was a good stat for them as well. So if you put that all together, this is someone that dodges most attacks, and they have a bunch of HP, so when they do get hit, it's like not a big deal. It's not like a rogue that goes down because they got hit, or a wizard. They can tank a bunch, but they don't even get hit. So Shinkai has a big weapon, never gets hit, deals a lot of damage. What else can you do? Well, there's a feat that makes it so 1s and 2s also count as 3s, so now the lowest you can roll on 2 dice is 6, and the maximum you can roll is 12. So your variance for each weapon damage is only 6. That's pretty significant. It builds up over time, especially in this game, which, like, combat was never fast and forth. Things have so much... Hold on. I got another book. 4th Ed Monster Manual. This is Orcus. He was one of the main villains in this edition, so much so that they put him on the cover. He looks like crap. Go look up the art for 5th Ed Orcus. It's much, much cooler than this. This looks like a raid boss. A forgettable one. Let's find a average level thing. Here we go. No. Let's go for something a little bigger. Perfect. A Mind Flayer. Very iconic D&D monster. These squid guys here. A Mind Flayer Mastermind in this edition had 324 health. That's not normal. Things aren't supposed to have that much health. Orcus has over 1,000 health. Or maybe that's the Tarask and he has slightly under, I forget. But fights were a slog in this game, and they went on for a long, long time. So have that as your context. Having consistent damage was really good. It's almost like it was an MMO or something where you're just supposed to hit your buttons every time they come up and make sure you're doing the raid right. But let's get back to Shinkai, because I do want to focus primarily on Shinkai. I can talk about 4th for a long time, and like I said, I probably will. But I just want to really go into this character's mechanics just for a little bit. So, has these things. As an Avenger, you also get Oath of Enmity, which lets you select a target and say, hey, I can roll 2d20 if I'm the only one fighting that target. That means meaning I'm the only one in melee range. It would happen all the time. You had things that made it so they literally had to 1v1 you. There was one power that literally made it so they couldn't see other enemies, so they could only fight you. Which, like, oh my god. It was a totally self-sufficient character. It had self-healing. It could do all of this shit. It could do off-healing for other people. It got bonuses on crits. There was no reason not to run a party of Avengers, and that was really lame. It was really lame to have a class that was so good that was an option for everyone to be. Because you want diversity, you want to have fun, you want to go do the different things, you want to, like, play a character, too. But when you were slightly unoptimized in 4th edition, you felt like garbage. Like, that was all there was to the game, was just optimizing. There was never like, I'll take this for flavor. That wasn't a fucking thing. You never went for it. So, I'm just going to bring it all the way up to the final form of Shinkai. By the final level with Shinkai, this character had an ability that allowed him, one, if it was crit, he was able to deal the damage he took by being crit back once per day. Then he had a thing that let him get that ability back, so he could do it twice per day. Then he had an ability that gave him an action point every time he scored a critical hit. Then he had something that made it so he crit from 18 to 20, as well as if he rolled the same number on both of his dice. Then he had an ability that every time he scored a critical hit, he got back in counter power. So this was a character who has decent odds of critting all of the time, has consistent damage, but could sometimes have these spikes in it. And every time there was a critical hit scored, he could just get a bunch of his abilities back, in addition to getting the ability to act again that turn. You couldn't use multiple action points in a turn, luckily, but getting to act again that turn, potentially getting another crit to set the whole thing up again. And a small increased crit range plus 2 dice that can get that crit, plus the ability that if those 2 dice are on the same thing, they crit, is a lot more than you think. Because a natural 20 is already a 5% chance. Pokemon crits aren't much higher chance, and they happen a fair amount. So I've got 2 dice that can get a 20. That's 2 individual 5% chances, and I'm not doing all this math because it gets... I don't know. I don't know how to do this part. Like, I just don't. I forget. I knew at one point. But an 18 to 20, that's already, 18, 19, 20? That's a 15% chance. Now you have 2 15% chances. And if for some reason both dice line up on their individual 5% chances, you can just crit. You can just crit if they roll the same number. So, Shinkai was busted, is what I'm trying to say. And being busted was easy in this game, but Shinkai was busted for this game. Because Shinkai also had items that made it so... Shinkai also had the ability to fly. He could just grow angel wings. He also had basic wisdom training, which means for all physical tasks, he could use his wisdom modifier instead, so I couldn't just throw a tough door to break down in front of him, or climbing, everything. There was an answer for everything. And there were 2 other items that made this very, very dangerous. The first was Goggles of Aurasight, which everybody fucking owned, which lets you once per encounter just, scan in Kingdom Hearts, or tattle in Paper Mario. It did that. It did tattle specifically. You literally got to know, what is this thing's maximum HP? What is its current HP? What are its weaknesses? What are its resistances? What are its immunities? You got to know all of that. And the thing about that was that it only took a minor action, and you could use it every fight. And there was a pretty high limit on how many magic items you could do. I don't even know if you did attunement, or most things didn't require attunement at that time. And magic items were much more plentiful because you needed to get your loot because it played like an MMO. So you got a new magic item every single level, and you needed to make sure everyone in the party got a magic item every level. It was a lot. It was really a lot. So this meant that a whole party of adventurers could basically scan a whole fight, and now they don't have to figure out any of it. There's no mystery to be had with it. And then there was Dice of Auspicious Fortune, or DOFs. We called them DOFs because they were in every fucking game. We needed an acronym because we couldn't keep calling them Dice of Auspicious Fortune. And what they were is you rolled 3 d20s at the start of the in-game day. And when you did that, you got to save those. And at any point in the day when you would roll a d20, you just say, nah, I got this one. And so, in that character that crits and gets a bunch of shit back on crits, and has the ability to attack, and all of this other crazy bullshit, there was something that now you could just have a number. So if you rolled a crit right then, in the morning, great, you've got a crit later. If you rolled a 3... if one of your dice happened to roll a 3 when you were rolling 2 of them, you could change the other one into a 3. And guess what you've got? A crit and an action point, and one of your encounter powers back. One of the encounter powers lets them attack multiple times, I was pretty sure. It was really, really, really tough to deal with. And I feel like there's more context required to fully, like, get what's going on with this. But I'm going to close... I feel like I have said enough that I can in a vacuum. But I feel like this is a good small introduction to what's wrong with 4th edition, and I'm going to leave it with this. There was a power in this game, a real power. Like a thing you could choose in the book, not homebrew, that the Avenger had that allowed it to, after an enemy was hit with an ability, could use this ability and make it so the difference between this ability's damage and the damage that the thing last took is how much ongoing damage the creature would take every turn with a chance to save against it. Avengers deal a lot of damage. They also do really consistent damage, where their damage floor and their damage ceiling aren't very far away from each other. This meant that when one of your allies, who needed to land a hit because it put a debuff on something, and it only did 10 damage, then you have an ability that does, on average, 110 damage. That meant that something could be taking ongoing 100. And it did. This happened more than once. And I talked to you about how that Mind Flayer had 300 HP and some of the endgame bosses in this game have 1,000. Combat is not designed to go quickly. But then you have this ability that can literally take out hundreds of HP within 2 turns. Now, mind you, 2 turns might mean that it's taken you an hour of playtime or 2, because it was a slog. Turns would take a really fucking long time. Everything was slow. Everything about this game was slow. It was terrible. But the thing with it is it meant that as a DM, there was an arms race. The book didn't do enough for you. Very soon after you started playing this game, you realized that, holy shit, if I make everything by the rules, then I'm going to lose. And by I'm going to lose, I mean no one's going to have fun. They're going to smack around some easy enemies, and then we're going to fucking move on, I guess. So, 4th edition is the hell that I forged my blade in, so to speak. It is where my DMing prowess comes from. And I have a lot of stories from a very cracked out game. And I just wanted to give the very basic mechanics of this character Shinkai. And I think the next time that I talk about it, I'll probably give you a little bit more about his group, some of what was going on there, and some of the really nutso stuff that happened. But that's it for this one. So, another day, another video. Till the end of the daily drop. This is CarnyPop, signing off. Bye.